Okay, so once again, I will continually scan the room. If you have any contributions or questions, please catch my eye, and we'll bring you in as soon as we can. I wanted to talk to you, though, first about the just sheer volume of problem that we have in the field of ransomware now. A survey last year revealed that 25% of Irish SMEs have paid multiple ransoms to cyber criminals. Patrick, as head of the Integrity 360 response team, you must have had some war stories to tell. So can you give us a picture of what it's like on the very front line? What is it like being a victim?
Well, luckily I've never been a victim, but we've dealt with clients that have, and just checking this is on. Yep. The one that comes to mind is we had a company about a month ago that basically had a vulnerability in one of their MS SQL servers. It was from 2010, so the server was literally vulnerable for about 13 years, and for some unknown reason, it was found to have, it took the attackers that long to compromise it, basically. So that was one. Another one we had was where we got, basically we noticed a database crash for the client. Then we looked, and it turns out that the attacker was trying to exfiltrate the data. And then we actually found that the attackers had chosen not to ransom the client. They had chosen to instead expose the client and try and get as much money that way. So that basically, because, I can't say who the client was, it was critical national infrastructure. So we had to be pretty careful.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like the ethics code that used to kind of be in place. I know we've been speaking about how, the ransomware attackers don't want to attack hospitals in the middle of a pandemic. But I think in the last 12 months, that seems to have almost been shaved off a bit, and now they're attacking anyone, right? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah.
That horizon has really broadened out. Paul, what in your observations are the sort of the hows of this right now? Why are these ransomware attacks sort of becoming more prevalent? How are they happening, and how is it manifesting?
I think go back to the talk earlier on where Jeff was talking about COVID, and a lot of these threat actors didn't really have the resources, didn't have the people. What we're starting to see now is a lot more automation or engagement with artificial intelligence. So we're starting to see a huge amount of a lot more automated attacks. I think that's a bigger concern because we're almost seeing a mass increase in I suppose these huge automated campaigns that are going out to the wide market. So they're not really targeting anyone specific, but just casting the net far and wide to see who they can get access to, who they can breach. And that's a concern because we looked at the Irish market within the SME space. A lot of these organizations may not be here in 3 years' time once they have been breached. So that's a big concern that we need to look at.
And Matt, from the industry perspective, how has it changed from pre-pandemic? Do you agree that we're seeing sort of, less morals in the victims?
Yeah, I think there was that brief period where, a number of sort of dark web marketplaces, etc., said they wouldn't sell, data or offer services to people that were targeting kind of healthcare and things like that. But that didn't last very long, to be honest with you. And it always comes down to money. And I think also, we're in a little bit of a financial depression, etc. And so, that doesn't just impact the likes of the people in this room. It impacts the threat actors as well, and they need to start saying, okay, actually, we need to make more money, and if we can target, easy targets, healthcare or education, or industries where they feel they might get a little bit more of a head start, they definitely will do that. And I think I like your point as well, is that when a new issue comes out, a new vulnerability comes out, like a SSL VPN vulnerability or a VMware vulnerability or anything that's internet facing, there are tools out there, like Shodan and other tools that the attackers are already gathering their data about. Here's 1,000 organizations that have that product, and they are ready to go within hours to try and get that initial foothold. And us as defenders, we need to also look at our environments in exactly the same way and kind of make sure that we're minutes ahead of them and actually, trying to stop them getting that initial foothold.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the perspective of the audience, how many of you are worried about obviously everyone's worried about ransomware, but how many of you are really actively worried about how it's tipping up at the moment? Just a quick show of hands as to how high on the agenda is it? It's fairly high on the agenda for everybody. Ellis, what do you think is driving this massive growth and shift in ransomware at the moment?
I think, as all of the guys have said, there are financial pressures out there that a lot of these organisations are feeling and wanting to overcome. But what we're seeing at the moment is the attacks are becoming a lot more sophisticated. So not just, the traditional ways of deploying ransomware, in terms of, getting on, downloading malware, executing it. We're actually seeing organisations being targeted now where there will be no malware deployed. There will be, they'll be using the tools that organisation has in order to turn them against them. So recently there was an incident with our software. An organisation was targeted, and what they did was use a script to change the password to BitLocker, but a totally legitimate program within that organisation's infrastructure, and then it encrypted all of the drives. So we're going to have to be a lot better at understanding how these attacks occur pre-exploit. What are the activities that these guys are doing before they get to a point that they are actually encrypting infrastructure. Otherwise, it's too late, right?
Yeah. At that point, it's too late. Absolutely. Patrick, does the geopolitical climate obviously play a big part? How much of a part have you noticed?
Well, obviously everyone knows about the war. It's obviously a big topic at the moment. I think the previous speaker said that both countries are obviously flinging stuff at each other at the moment. There has been evidence that the likes of Russia has been targeting the West more, so in terms of like the UK, for example, because being one of the major players in NATO, to demoralise us is really effective because it kind of takes down one of the legs of the table as it is. So it's still very much the war does play a big part in it, but just one thing I learned a couple of weeks ago was that Russia is thinking of legalising hacking, so for targets that are not Russian. So basically, if you're a Russian threat actor and you're attacking someone in, let's say, France, then the Russian government will not prosecute you.
Are they going to be taxing them as well?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
We're laughing about it, but it is a really serious threat and a worry. And Paul, they are becoming far more organised. We've spoken about this, we've heard about this. Jeff was saying call centres. My own personal experience of scam call centres is my dad has unfortunately got himself tangled up in an online dating. And it's literally, I've been following the conversations. He's having a conversation with somebody on this online dating app who, to us, is clearly not one lady. It's probably several young men. But it is a factory. It's a machine. So what's the impact of that? And is there anything or what are we doing as an industry to try and combat it?
So what we're starting to see is a lot more campaign-led. Like any business would try to drive a sales campaign or a campaign into a new market. So a lot of them have got very similar systems, like we use Salesforce. They might have HubSpot. They've got indexes of who the targets are. They may already even have indexes of who the accounts that they have that are breached. So they might be using a broker. So they might already have that there available as well. And a lot of them have been driven with targets. Now, a lot of these organizations aren't like some of the bigger hacker groups where they might say they'll act with integrity. They may say that this is their modus operandi, that they may not attack hospitals or, we spoke earlier on about a maternity hospital that had operation theaters impacted. So, but it's these other groups that are on the periphery that are getting people into a business, working there 16 hours a day and driving them really hard to breach any and everyone and leveraging technology to do that. So it has been, they are businesses in their own right. Some of them are being brought into a business and interviewing into a business, and they may not know that that's what they're going in for. I think that's the challenge. That's a concern that we have. The other thing is the lack of legislation globally around it is going to mean that it's going to be harder for us to police it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Matt, talking about my dad's situation again, you know, I feel that one of the sort of key vectors for getting the money mules now engaged is not necessarily even hiring them, but actually, you know, using unsuspecting romantic partners to use their bank accounts through. What's your sort of, what can you add about these call centre groups?
Yeah, I mean, it is a business, and actually, you know, I watched a documentary about it similar to what you described, where, you know, you think about these kind of call centres, you know, malware threat actors, whatever. Actually, a lot of these people don't proactively want to be involved in those things, right? No. They are being kidnapped, they are being pressured into doing these things and working, you know, actually being held into, you know, quite bad circumstances themselves, just on a conveyor belt of, you know, doing these things for the management staff. So, yeah, you know, it's you know, when we think about these kind of threat actor groups, not everyone that actually plays within these groups are necessarily always have bad intentions initially. They are just caught up in quite bad practices, which is unfortunate. So, yeah, again, you know, you look at you know, dark web forums, etc., and you see the kind of advertisements for, you know, people giving initial access to networks and things like that. A lot of these people get often pressured into being that, you know, that patient zero, right? That, you know, I'm going to send you an email and I need you to open that email, and if you don't, I will do this. So, you know, it's that's the kind of pressure that people can have as well, which is quite an interesting, that whole insider threat piece. And again, you know, the financial pressures that people have, there is that angle to it as well.
Ellis, they do seem, the threat actors now, they seem to be getting better and better at that social engineering, forming a bond with their victim almost. How does that impact the, you know, the whole ecosystem of being ransomware and then having to go through insurance?
Well, I think, you know, we've seen phishing campaigns and social engineering kind of take off, especially over the last 6 months, as stuff like, you know, the generative AI has come to the fore, these large language models, where you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the 4 people that are talking to your father soon, because their language will reflect exactly exactly the same tone and grammar and kind of stop words, he says. I see ums through a sentence. That all of them will be kind of opaque to the end user. So, you know, we're seeing, you know, we talked about the Nigerian prince emails, and we kind of all had a laugh about it as we were going through a checkpoint presentation. But the reality is that you won't be able to tell soon whether that email is real or fake. You won't be able to tell whether that chat is real or fake, because it will be driven by AI and it will be told to sound in a certain way. And when you chat with these AI models, is incredible, right? The level of accuracy is really, really keen. And when you say, tell it to me in the style of, I don't know, Vicky Pollard, it sounds like Vicky Pollard, right? So all of these things that these threat actors have struggled with, because it's second language, it's not, you know, it's difficult for them to grasp. They're going to have a real leg up over the next few months.
So next time you're chatting to Vicky Pollard online, everybody, just be warned. Anybody got any contributions or questions before I crack on with what's on my sheet? No? Alex, I did actually want, because when we discussed this, obviously in preparation, we were talking about one of the issues with insurance, right? And, you know, we've already had a few like moans about the insurance industry so far today.
Yeah.
But there is sort of indications that the threat actors are beginning to try and work with their victims. Can you describe that?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing more and more is the guys who are driving these engagements, so the ransomware actors who, you know, finally get through to talking to somebody in probably, you know, in your team or in a cyber insurer's team, are trying to work out where they can pitch their tent. In that they will look to befriend the person they're working with, or at least make them feel like they're cooperating with them to get the best possible finish for them. And what that often looks like is them saying to whoever it is that, hey, we know you've got cyber insurance because we've already sucked up all of your documents from all of your document servers. Working through it, it looks like we could extort you for X amount, and that wouldn't affect you guys. You just have to pay your kind of insurance premium, and then at least the insurance person is the insurance firm is the person that's affected, not you guys. And that's a really interesting angle where they're not just blindly demanding we want 60,000 euros from you or whatever it happens to be. They're working collaboratively with the victim to try and make sure they get the most out of that organisation as possible, which is an incredible place to be in, right?
It kind of is. And Paul, it's already difficult enough to get insurance companies to pay out. Are the insurance companies getting wind of this practice yet?
Yes, we're starting to see a lot of reports where we're starting to see insurance companies are stopping and looking for ways out. I think the other concern is after the fact. So we've had a number of engagements with a number of companies who have been breached in the past, but now the struggle they have is trying to get reinsured. So it doesn't matter what strategy, what technologies they've deployed, what tactics they've actually delivered back in terms of what their approach to their new cybersecurity strategy is. We've seen a lot of pushback from a lot of insurance companies on actually reinsuring them, and that's a bigger concern.
And they're leaving themselves a little bit of time to get out of jail free a lot of the time. So we've seen Lloyd's of London issued a writ last month where anything that is deemed to be state-led is not insurable. Now, if you are ransomware through a WannaCry type tool, well, essentially that was developed for war, right? So that's a state-led tool. So they've got this kind of get out of jail free card where anything that's state-led we can't insure you against. And the exclusions that they're starting to push into policies will become ever more tighter. We've seen the kind of infrastructure type prerequisites, right, where you have to have multi-factor authentication, you have to have 24/7 monitoring, you have to have some sort of log management. They're going to start talking about actually if this is people-led, and as we've just discussed, the attackers are getting better at targeting people, then we probably won't be paying out either. And that's the type of exclusions we kind of see coming over the hill at the moment.
I was just going to say on the insurance side, as working for a vendor, we get a lot of inbound from insurance companies, insurance groups that are looking to improve the way they measure the security posture of their customers so that they aren't losing as much money and they have a much better trust in that the customer is more resilient to attacks, so they're less likely to need to pay out. So they're looking at security vendors like us and saying, okay, can we run tools like you and suites of products in the customer's environment that then gives us metrics back to show you how well you're performing, and based on your performance, we will give you a premium of X. A little bit like when you get that little black box in your car that shows you how fast or well you're driving, right? It's the same thing. So a lot of insurance companies are looking at ways of trying to do things better themselves. So some are walking away. Others are saying, can we tighten our controls a little bit more?
Yeah, Patrick.
We had a client where they had cyber insurance, and we did IR for them. And unfortunately, that client's security wasn't the best, like years of neglect. And as a result of our IR report, basically, as part of a standard IR report is you give them recommendations and pretty much you give them a full health check of how good their security was. Unfortunately, because of that, the insurance company didn't want to pay out because they'd basically seen the report and seen the years of neglect, and having insurance actually it didn't work out for them at all. So that client then just basically took an IR retainer and forgot the insurance. So,
anybody here in the insurance industry? Quick show of hands. Good, right. Oh, was that a show of hands for in the insurance industry, or you want to ask a question? I mean, it's tough, right? Because, and I don't know if Sarah, if you would agree with me or not, but the sense that I get from speaking to all of you gentlemen through the preparation is that the insurance industry doesn't really know how to assess the risk of ransomware yet, and that's a huge problem. Would you agree, sir?
Yeah, well, it strikes me that if your security isn't good enough, you'd be better off investing the money in your security
Right. For those of you who couldn't hear that, it strikes that this gentleman is, if your insurance isn't good enough, you're better off putting your money into better equipment. Yeah, because yes.
You have to look at it through the lens of the insurance companies as well, right? They've basically been issuing premiums, quite small premiums in most cases, for organisations over the last sort of 5-10 years. They haven't really understood the risk, and the risk is infinite, right? We don't know how much money ransomware groups, whatever attackers it is, can take out of organisations. So to have them starting to put processes in place that limits that risk, just like your black box example, it shouldn't be a surprise. And as an I tend to agree with you at the moment. The premiums are going up. The cost of those premiums could be better pushed into strengthening your defences, understanding the risk within your organisation, and having a kind of a proper, mature cybersecurity process.
Yeah, I think it's hard to understand though what is the mature process, because technology's changed and evolved so quick. Like, if I feel quite bad for CISOs, for risk officers and organisations, because with the way technology's changing, for them to try keep up with that adoption, to keep up with where that sits within their own frameworks, is quite difficult as well. So even more so for the insurance companies to understand what is best of breed, because that's another thing that's quite difficult.
Yeah.
So you may be on a path for change within your organisation, but what is best of breed today is not going to be best of breed tomorrow.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Correct. Yeah, and also, I heard from someone the other day actually about, insurance companies, rightly so actually, cannot prescribe one particular technology to solve a risk, because then they become complicit in the issue. If that organisation is compromised and it was the insurance company that recommended the specific security product that didn't do the job, then the insurance company is on the hook for the problem. So they have to kind of recommend processes, or here are a set of types of technologies or processes that you should look at. But then again, it comes down to what you said. Some tools are better than other tools. So the premium, the insurance company have to look at it and say, okay, based on the Gartner quadrant or whatever it is, we think you've got a higher risk because you've gone for a vendor that hasn't scored as well in that area, or whatever it might be. So it is a tough one. I think, I don't know car insurance well. I don't know, housing insurance or anything like that. But it seems there's more of a finite set of issues that can go wrong with a house or a car, and therefore you can kind of better judge the level of risk. Whereas I think IT security is changing on a minute-by-minute basis, and that's why it's so hard to get the balance right.
Right, what you're insured for today might not even be the risk that you're facing tomorrow.
100%, yeah, exactly. Suddenly ChatGPT is a new risk, and no one's included that in their risk profile or whatever it might be.
Well, I mean, ChatGPT and generative AI is a huge topic for this debate, but I'm going to have to be selective about the topics we cover, actually. And because they're going to be speaking about it we've got some CISOs over there who are very pleased with what you just said, by the way, I'm sure. But we've got the CISO panel coming up, and so I'm going to skip over ChatGPT, just really to give us a chance to dig into the what to do section of this discussion. Before I do, though, anybody would like to say anything, ask anything, join in the conversation from the audience? What a well-behaved audience you are when we've got no time left on the day. Well, let's talk about the aspect of what to do. Visibility obviously being key, it's the theme today. Ellis, what are the steps to successfully handling an attack once you're in the midst of it?
I think in terms of what we're seeing, and often it is case by case, but there are things that you can do. When you are seeing ransomware incidents, and generally, most teams are seeing ransomware incidents when somebody walks in with a laptop that's got a different background or is behaving a bit oddly, is taking it seriously and getting it into the business's mindset. And I think the way to do that is not to wait for that laptop to come in with ransomware on it. Is a lot of organisations would benefit from training and tabletop exercises that allow them to understand what is going to happen in their organisation, right? If you don't have your risk, your security, your IT, your operational, even your HR aligned on these things, it's very difficult to learn. If the first time that they are having to experience a ransomware incident is during a live ransomware incident when they are running around with their trousers on fire, quite frankly. It's very difficult to get anything done. If you can learn what's likely to happen, and you won't be able to cover every scenario, but if you can at least have a plan and a training, a regular kind of run through of that plan, then you're much more likely to come out the other end in a good place.
Yeah, fire drill, but also with balance, not too often, so that people can become complacent.
Absolutely.
It's a very delicate measure. So, Paul, what role can technology play in sort of the resolution to an attack?
I think it can play a massive role. So what we're starting to see, as we mentioned earlier on, we're starting to see AI and machine learning being a massive impact on the bad guys, if you want to call them, using that to breach your environments. So the more that you're investing in more kind of interoperability between solution stacks, I think that's really important, because the more you can leverage technology or machines to fight machines, if you want to call it, the better off you're going to be. But then it does come back to visibility. The more you can allow or invest in technology that's going to give you greater visibility, that'll end up giving you greater control. But none of it's important if you don't have the right strategy in place. So to me, is get the right strategy in place around your adoption of technology, and then from there, leverage technology to fight technology.
Should you pay? I mean, we saw from the slide in Jeff's presentation, some people pay, some people don't. I mean, I suppose we don't see the data of the people who pay, but is there a general rule of thumb, or?
I think that's a really hard question. I think that there's a lot of IR experts out there that will be able to give you statistics around who has paid and who hasn't paid, and implications around that. I think that having some type of retainer in place is really important, because you guys as customers or as end users are siloed in terms of your own experience around it. So, you know, in Ireland we talk about it takes a community to raise a kid or raise a family. Use your community around you to support you as an organisation, vendors, partners who have got the experience, who can help you in those scenarios, because every scenario is different.
Right. Patrick, from your experience as well in the field, what are the steps that you should take once you've been attacked?
I just want to say, don't pay.
Don't pay.
Yeah.
It's
Don't-
never only
just-
one payment,
just
is
don't
it?
do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, a good evidence of if a company is paid or not is if the publication on the ransomware site has gone or not. So
Yeah.
keep an eye on
absolutely.
them. If it's gone, then they've probably paid. So anyway, what are good steps to?
Yeah, and can the
prevent-
data be recovered, for example, if it's?
It depends on the threat actor, it depends on the ransomware. These days, the majority of ransomwares we're seeing are, you know, the likes of Conti, Lockbit, Blackbuster. These guys use pretty sophisticated malware, and as in like they use the, you know, standard AES encryption with RSA keys. Not a lot you can do there, and they come out with new pieces of malware all the time. So new variants, like new iterations. So it's hard to recover. I'd say the best thing to do is, and this is coming from a side of having to pick up the pieces for a lot of orgs, is backups. Like just have really robust backups and keep them offline.
Yeah.
Don't stick them on the same network that the live data's on.
Yeah.
Like we've seen it once where there was two data racks in the same data center. One's backups. To the left of it was the live stuff, and it was literally connected by a network cable. What's the point?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely pointless.
yeah, and that's an instant insurance fail as well. So, so backups is the main thing. But I just really want to echo, if you want to detect, the best way to stop a ransomware is start at that really early stage. And I can't remember which one of you said it, but start at the really early stage of the ransomware. Don't wait until files are being encrypted, because when files are being encrypted, that's the last stage of the ransomware.
Yeah.
You want to focus on the the phishing email, the exploit, the social engineering, basically. So focus on that stuff, and you will catch the majority of it. So
Brilliant. In the last 2 minutes that we have, literally, Matt, I will hand it to you. Any last pearls of wisdom in terms of avoiding or combating the spread of ransomware?
Yeah, I think it's a few things that some of these guys have said actually. You know, that preparation, the communication plans that you've got. You know, if your reliance is on that, I'm going to use Microsoft Teams to speak to my colleagues about this ransomware. Well, if Microsoft Teams has gone in a ransomware scenario, so now what do you do? So make sure that you've got these kind of communication plans, understand that you will get ransomware and you need to have that official plan. I think also that initial example you gave, that vulnerability that existed for ages. Ransomware, whilst it's the malware is very clever in terms of what it's doing and getting in there, is the common underlying issues that aren't being fixed, the vulnerabilities, the credentials, the lack of network segmentation. So it's just kind of doubling down on the things that we've needed to do for the last 20, 30 years, but paying attention to those things. Next gen this, next gen that is good, but actually it's the underlying problems that we need to fix.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time on this panel, but I believe all of you will be around for the networking drinks for at least for a portion of the time. So I'm sure you can pick their brains about any of your ransomware woes, but please put your hands together to thank my wonderful ransomware panel.
Thank you very much.